Private Arthur Gray stood rigid outside the conference room, his eyes scanning the corridor of the neutral space station Harmony. The tense diplomatic meeting between human and Bajoran representatives continued behind closed doors. Arthur's mind wandered, considering the vast differences between their species. He never imagined he'd be here, guarding alien diplomats and pondering interstellar relations. A young Bajoran woman approached, her steps hesitant. Arthur recognized her as Indus, a junior aide to the alien delegation. She fidgeted with her hands, eyes darting between Arthur's face and the floor. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Excuse me, human. I have a question about your physiology." Arthur raised an eyebrow. "Yes?" Indus's cheeks flushed a deeper shade of blue. "I'm curious about what's between your legs. How does it differ from Bajoran anatomy?" Arthur's training hadn't prepared him for this. He opened his mouth, searching for a diplomatic response, when alarms blared throughout the station. Red lights flashed, bathing the corridor in an ominous glow. "Unidentified vessel breaching station defenses," a computerized voice announced. "All personnel to battle stations. Diplomats and civilians proceed to designated safe zones." Arthur's comm unit crackled to life. "Private Gray, escort the Bajoran delegation to safety immediately." "Understood," Arthur replied, his earlier embarrassment forgotten. He turned to Indus, whose eyes were wide with fear. "Stay close to me. We need to move." As chaos erupted around them, Arthur guided Indus and the other Bajorans through Harmony's winding corridors. The space station's layout, once familiar, now seemed treacherous. Every corner could hide a potential threat. They rounded a bend, and Arthur's instincts screamed danger. He raised his hand, signaling the group to halt. Voices drifted from an adjacent passageway, unfamiliar and hostile. "Cardassian pirates," Arthur whispered, recognizing the distinct accent. "They're here to sabotage the peace talks." Indus gasped, her earlier shyness replaced by terror. Arthur met her gaze, hoping to convey reassurance. He unholstered his weapon, took a deep breath, and stepped into view of the intruders. The firefight was intense but brief. Arthur's combat training kicked in, his movements fluid and precise. He ducked, rolled, and returned fire, neutralizing the immediate threat with ruthless efficiency. As the last pirate fell, Arthur felt a sharp pain in his side. A stray shot had grazed him. Indus rushed to his side, concern evident in her alien features. "You're hurt," she said, reaching out to examine the wound. Arthur winced but allowed her to help. As Indus tended to his injury, he realized the gravity of the situation. The pirates weren't just here to disrupt the talks, they were after something specific. "The data core," Arthur said, his voice tight. "They're after the information about Bajor's planetary defenses." Indus's eyes widened in understanding. The future of her people, the delicate balance of power in this sector of space, hung in the balance. Arthur made a split-second decision. "We need to split up," he told the group. "I'll take Indus and the data core through the maintenance tunnels. The rest of you continue to the escape pods." As they parted ways, Arthur couldn't help but notice how Indus's earlier nervousness had transformed into determination. They crawled through narrow passages, their bodies close in the confined space. The unspoken attraction between them simmered beneath the surface, adding another layer of tension to their perilous journey. Somewhere above them, human and Bajoran diplomats struggled to maintain their fragile alliance in the face of this new threat. But here, in the bowels of Harmony Station, a human soldier and a shy alien girl held the key to their people's future, and perhaps to understanding each other in ways they never expected. Arthur and Indus crouched low in the dimly lit maintenance tunnel, their breath coming in short gasps. The narrow passageway stretched before them, bathed in the eerie glow of emergency lighting. Arthur's side throbbed where the pirate's shot had grazed him, but he pushed the pain aside, focusing on the task at hand. "This way," he whispered, guiding Indus around a fallen support beam. The metal groaned ominously as they squeezed past, forcing them to press close together. Arthur felt the heat of Indus's body against his, her alien physiology both familiar and strange. As they navigated the labyrinthine tunnels, they encountered numerous obstacles. Debris from the pirate attack littered their path, and malfunctioning doors threatened to trap them at every turn. Arthur's combat training proved invaluable as he helped Indus climb over twisted metal and pry open jammed panels. "Careful," Arthur warned as Indus slipped on a patch of coolant leaking from a damaged conduit. He caught her arm, steadying her. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and Arthur felt a jolt of electricity that had nothing to do with the sparking wires around them. They pressed on, their bodies close in the confined space. Arthur's heightened awareness of Indus's presence only added to the tension of their situation. As they rounded a corner, voices drifted through a crack in the wall. Arthur held up a hand, signaling Indus to stop. "Once we have the Bajoran defense data, the invasion will be unstoppable," a gruff voice said. The Cardassian accent was unmistakable. Indus's eyes widened in horror. Arthur felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. The stakes had just risen exponentially. "We need to warn our people," Indus whispered urgently. Arthur nodded, scanning the corridor. His eyes landed on a battered communications panel. "Over there," he said, moving swiftly to the device. As Arthur worked to establish a secure connection, Indus kept watch. Her earlier shyness had vanished, replaced by a steely tenacity that Arthur found oddly attractive. He pushed the thought aside, focusing on encrypting the message. "Transmission sent," Arthur announced, just as alarms began blaring throughout the station. "They've detected us," Indus said, fear creeping into her voice. Arthur grabbed her hand. "Run!" They sprinted through the tunnels, the sound of heavy footsteps echoing behind them. Arthur's mind raced, searching for a way out. As they burst into a small maintenance bay, he spotted their salvation, a sleek Cardassian scout ship. "We're going to steal that ship," Arthur declared, already moving towards the vessel. Indus hesitated. "But we don't know how to fly it." "We'll figure it out," Arthur assured her, his confidence bolstering her perseverance. As they approached the ship, a lone Cardassian guard stepped into view, weapon raised. Arthur reacted instantly, years of training taking over. He ducked under the guard's first shot, closing the distance between them in seconds. The two grappled, a furious exchange of blows. Arthur's human strength gave him an edge, but the Cardassian's armor absorbed much of the impact. From the corner of his eye, Arthur saw Indus hefting a piece of debris. "Hey!" she shouted, hurling the makeshift projectile at the guard's head. The distraction was all Arthur needed. He swept the Cardassian's legs out from under him, following up with a precise strike to a vulnerable spot on the alien's neck. The guard crumpled, unconscious. "Nice work," Arthur panted, flashing Indus a grin. They boarded the scout ship, Arthur sliding into the pilot's seat. His hands moved over the unfamiliar controls, muscle memory from countless simulations guiding him. Indus leaned over his shoulder, her breath warm on his neck as she deciphered the Cardassian symbols. "That's the ignition sequence," she said, pointing to a series of glyphs. Arthur nodded, inputting the commands. The ship hummed to life just as alarms blared throughout the maintenance bay. Cardassian pirates poured in, energy weapons blazing. "Hold on!" Arthur yelled, punching the thrusters. The scout ship lurched forward, scraping against the bay doors as they opened. Weapons fire peppered the hull, but Arthur's evasive maneuvers kept them from sustaining critical damage. With a final burst of speed, they cleared the station, open space yawning before them. For a moment all was quiet. Arthur and Indus exchanged a look of relief, which quickly turned to concern as proximity alarms blared. Multiple Cardassian vessels appeared on the sensors, closing fast. "Can this thing go any faster?" Indus asked, gripping the back of Arthur's chair. Arthur's heart made in purpose. "Let's find out." He pushed the engines to their limit, weaving through a dense asteroid field. The pursuing ships fell back, unwilling to risk the treacherous terrain. Arthur then plunged them into a nebula cloud, using the electromagnetic interference to mask their signature. During a brief respite, Indus insisted on examining Arthur's wound. Her gentle touch sent shivers through him as she applied a makeshift bandage. "Thank you," Arthur said softly, their faces inches apart. The moment was shattered by blaring alarms. More Cardassian ships had found them. "We can't keep this up forever," Indus said, worry etching her features. Arthur studied the star chart, a plan forming in his mind. We'll make for the nearest human outpost. It's our best chance to get this data to safety and warn both our peoples. As they sped towards human space, Arthur and Indus found themselves discussing the potential fallout of their actions. The diplomatic implications were staggering. Do you think this will bring our species closer together or drive us apart? Indus asked, her earlier curiosity about human physiology seeming trivial in light of recent events. Arthur considered the question, acutely aware of the connection forming between them. I don't know, he admitted, but I think we've proven that humans and Bajorans can work together when it counts. A fierce barrage of weapons fire rocked the ship, cutting their conversation short. The Cardassian fleet had caught up, their weapons far outclassing the small scout ship's defenses. Arthur's hands flew over the controls, pushing the stolen vessel to its absolute limit. The hull groaned in protest as he executed a series of maneuvers that would have been suicidal in a larger ship. There, Indus shouted, pointing to a distant star cluster. That's human territory. Arthur nodded grimly, setting a course. They were so close, but with the Cardassian ships bearing down on them, it seemed impossible they would make it. The scout ship shuddered under another volley of fire, systems failing across the board. As klaxons blared and warning lights flashed, Arthur and Indus shared a look of understanding. Whatever happened next, they were in this together. Human and Bajoran, soldier and diplomat, united in a desperate bid for survival, and perhaps something more. The human outpost grew larger in their viewport, a beacon of hope in the vastness of space. But with the Cardassian fleet closing in, their future remained uncertain. Arthur gripped the controls tighter, prepared to wring every last ounce of performance from their battered ship. The final leg of their journey stretched out before them, a gauntlet of danger and possibility. The fate of two species hung in the balance, along with the fragile connection forming between an unlikely pair thrust into extraordinary circumstances. Their stolen Cardassian scout ship hurtled towards human space, its engines straining against the constant barrage of enemy fire. Arthur's hands flew over the controls, his fists tight in concentration as he pushed the vessel to its limits. Suddenly, the viewport filled with a chaotic array of twisted metal and shattered hulls. Arthur's eyes widened as he realized they had stumbled upon a massive debris field, the aftermath of a recent battle between human and Cardassian forces. Indus, I need you on sensors, Arthur called out, his voice tight. We're going to have to thread the needle through this mess. Indus nodded, her fingers dancing across the alien console. I'm detecting multiple collision risks. Uploading data to your navigation display now. The ship lurched as Arthur banked hard to avoid a chunk of hull plating larger than their entire vessel. Warning klaxons blared as systems began to fail, one by one. We're losing power to the starboard engines, Indus reported, her voice steady despite the panic evident in her eyes. Hull integrity is down to 62%. Arthur's mind raced, calculating their options. The Cardassian pursuers were closing in, and their ship was falling apart around them. He made a split-second decision. We can't make it to the outpost, he said grimly. There's a planet nearby, X-395. It's our only chance. As they approached the planet, its harsh, rocky surface came into view. Arthur struggled to keep the ship steady as they entered the turbulent upper atmosphere. The vessel groaned and shuddered, threatening to tear itself apart. Brace for impact, Arthur shouted, fighting the controls as they plummeted towards the surface. With a bone-jarring crash, the scout ship slammed into a rocky canyon. Metal screamed as it tore against stone, and for a moment Arthur feared they would be crushed. But his skillful piloting had paid off. They were alive, even if their ship was beyond repair. Smoke filled the cabin as Arthur and Indus scrambled to gather essential supplies. They grabbed emergency rations, portable communicators, and most importantly, the Bajoran data core. We need to move, Arthur said, helping Indus out of the wreckage. It won't take the Cardassians long to track us here. They set out across the alien landscape, the thin atmosphere making every breath a struggle. Indus seemed to be having a harder time, her Bajoran physiology less adapted to the harsh conditions. "Are you all right?" Arthur asked, noticing her labored breathing. Indus nodded, purpose etched on her face. "I'll manage. We can't afford to slow down." As they trekked across the barren terrain, a blood-curdling screech echoed through the canyon. Arthur's hand went to his weapon as a creature emerged from behind a rock formation. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. A six-limbed predator with razor-sharp claws and multiple rows of teeth. "Get behind me," Arthur ordered, pushing Indus back as he took aim at the creature. The alien beast lunged, its speed surprising for its size. Arthur fired, the energy blast scorching its hide, but failing to stop its charge. As the creature bore down on them, Indus grabbed a jagged piece of debris from their crash and hurled it with startling accuracy. The makeshift weapon lodged in the beast's eye, causing it to rear back in pain. Arthur seized the opportunity, firing again and again until the predator finally collapsed. He turned to Indus, impressed by her quick thinking. "Nice throw," he said, a hint of admiration in his voice. Indus smiled, a mix of relief and pride on her face. "I guess those diplomatic receptions taught me something after all." As night began to fall, they approached a steep cliff face. Arthur eyed it warily, knowing they had no choice but to climb if they wanted to find shelter before dark. "I'll go first," he said, testing handholds in the rocky surface. "Follow my path exactly." They ascended slowly, the thin air making each movement an effort. Arthur's arms burned as he pulled himself up, constantly checking to ensure Indus was managing behind him. Suddenly, he heard a gasp and the sound of falling rocks. He looked down to see Indus hanging by one hand, her feet scrambling for purchase on the smooth cliff face. "Arthur!" she cried out, panic clear in her voice. Without hesitation, Arthur lunged downward, his hand shooting out to grasp Indus's wrist just as her grip failed. For a heart-stopping moment, they dangled precariously, Arthur's muscles straining as he held both their weights. With a grunt of exertion, he hauled Indus up until she could regain her hold on the cliff. They clung to the rock face, hearts pounding, bodies pressed close by necessity and shared fear. "I've got you," Arthur said softly, his eyes locked with Indus's. "I won't let you fall." Something passed between them in that moment, a connection that went beyond their shared ordeal. As they resumed their climb, both felt a shift in their relationship, unspoken but undeniable. They finally reached the top of the cliff as darkness settled over the alien world. In the distance, Arthur spotted the mouth of a cave system. "There," he pointed, "we can take shelter for the night." As they entered the cave, the temperature dropped rapidly. Arthur and Indus huddled together for warmth, the intimacy of their position impossible to ignore. "I've never been this close to a human before," Indus said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your body temperature, it's higher than I expected." Arthur found himself acutely aware of every point of contact between them. "And you're cooler," he replied. "It's interesting." Their eyes met in the dim light, and for a moment the universe seemed to shrink to just the two of them. Arthur felt an overwhelming urge to close the distance between their lips, to explore this newfound connection further. But before he could act, a low rumble filled the air. They froze, listening intently as the sound grew louder. "Cardassian shuttles," Arthur said grimly, the spell broken. "They've found us." Indus's eyes widened in fear, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "What do we do now?" Arthur's mind raced, formulating a plan. "We need to move and fast. But first, we're going to lay some false trails. I've got a few tricks that might buy us some time." As they prepared to venture back out into the alien night, Arthur couldn't help but feel a mix of dread and excitement. The odds were stacked against them, but with Indus by his side, he felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, they stepped out of the cave and into uncertainty, the sound of Cardassian engines growing ever closer. Louder. Arthur gripped Indus's arm, pulling her away from the cave entrance. "We need to move. Now!" They plunged into the darkness, relying on the dim glow of their emergency lights to navigate the treacherous terrain. As they rounded a bend, Arthur's light illuminated a series of strange markings on the cave wall. "Wait," Indus whispered, her eyes widening. "These symbols, they're similar to ancient Bajoran scripts I've studied." Arthur glanced back nervously. the sound of Cardassian voices echoing in the distance. "Can you read them?" Indus traced her fingers over the glyphs, her brow furrowed in concentration. "It's not exact, but I think it's directions to some kind of control room." A plan began to form in Arthur's mind. If there's a control room, there might be a way to contact help. It's our best shot. They followed the cryptic instructions, descending deeper into the cave system. The air grew thicker with an electric charge, raising the hair on Arthur's arms. Finally, they emerged into a vast chamber filled with alien technology, its surfaces covered in pulsing lights and strange organic-looking conduits. "Incredible," Indus breathed, her eyes reflecting the ethereal glow of the ancient machinery. Arthur approached what appeared to be a central console, his hand hovering over the unfamiliar controls. "Any idea how to work this?" Before Indus could respond, a low hum filled the air. Panels slid open in the walls, revealing rows of metallic figures. Arthur's combat instincts kicked in as the first robot lurched to life, its glowing eyes fixed on the intruders. "Security system," he muttered, drawing his weapon. "Indus, see if you can find a way to contact help. I'll hold them off." Arthur took up a defensive position as the ancient robots advanced. His energy blasts seemed to have little effect on their armor, forcing him to rely on evasion and hand-to-hand combat. He ducked under a swinging metal arm, using the robot's momentum to send it crashing into its companions. Meanwhile, Indus worked feverishly at the alien console, her diplomat's mind racing to decipher the complex interface. "Come on," she muttered, fingers dancing across the controls. "There has to be a way to—" Suddenly, the console lit up with a burst of energy. A beam of light shot upward, piercing through the cave ceiling and into the atmosphere above. "I think I did it," Indus called out, her voice filled with a mix of excitement and disbelief. "I've activated some kind of communication device." Arthur grunted as he grappled with another robot, using its body as a shield against its comrades. "Let's hope someone friendly is listening." In orbit above X-395, the HSS Intrepid was conducting a routine patrol when its sensors lit up with an unprecedented energy signature. "Captain Holt," the science officer reported, "we're detecting a powerful signal from the planet's surface. It doesn't match any known configurations." Captain Marcus Holt leaned forward in his chair, his interest piqued. "What else can you tell me?" "Sir, I'm also picking up life signs, human and Bajoran." Holt's eyebrows shot up. "Human and Bajoran? Together? That's not something you see every day. Helm, set a course for the signal's origin. Let's find out what's going on down there." Back in the alien control room, Arthur was beginning to tire. The robots kept coming, their relentless advance pushing him back towards Indus. "Any luck with an off switch for these things?" he called out, narrowly avoiding a metallic fist. Indus shook her head, frustration evident in her voice. "I can't make sense of half these systems, but the signal is still transmitting. Someone has to have heard it by now." A loud explosion from above cut off Arthur's reply. The ceiling shook, raining dust and debris into the chamber. "Cardassians," Arthur growled. "They've breached the outer defenses. We need to move." He grabbed Indus's hand, pulling her away from the console and towards a darkened passageway. They sprinted through winding corridors, the sounds of battle echoing behind them. Cardassian shouts mixed with the whine of energy weapons and the metallic clanking of the ancient robots. As they rounded a corner, Arthur skidded to a halt. Before them stood a circular platform surrounded by glowing pillars. Strange symbols, similar to those they had seen earlier, covered its surface. "Another control panel," Indus observed, quickly moving to examine it. Arthur took up a defensive position, keeping his weapon trained on the passage behind them. "Make it quick. We've got company coming." Indus's hands flew over the alien interface, her earlier experience giving her a slight edge in understanding its operation. Suddenly, the platform hummed to life, a shimmering field of energy appearing above it. "Arthur, I think it's some kind of teleportation device." He glanced back, seeing the hope and fear warring in her eyes. The sound of approaching Cardassians made the decision for him. "No time like the present," Arthur said, holstering his weapon and stepping onto the platform. He held out his hand to Indus. "Together?" She took it without hesitation, squeezing tightly as she joined him on the alien device. Together. The energy field enveloped them, just as the first Cardassian soldiers burst into the room. Arthur's last sight was of their shocked faces before the world dissolved into a swirl of light and sensation. When reality reasserted itself, Arthur and Indus found themselves in a vast underground chamber, far larger than the control room they had left. Row upon row of sleek, otherworldly vessels filled the space, their designs unlike anything either of them had ever seen. "By the prophets," Indus whispered, her eyes wide with awe. Arthur's tactical mind was already racing, taking in the implications of what they had discovered. This isn't just a historical site, it's a fully equipped base. Before they could explore further, a flickering light caught their attention. A holographic figure materialized before them, its form alien yet somehow familiar. "Greetings, Seekers," the hologram intoned, its voice resonating with an otherworldly timbre. "You have proven yourselves worthy to access the legacy of the precursors." Arthur and Indus exchanged a look of stunned disbelief as the hologram continued, revealing the purpose of the hidden facility and providing them with access codes to its systems. The implications were staggering. They had stumbled upon technology that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. As the hologram faded, leaving them with the weight of their newfound knowledge, a distant rumbling reminded them of the immediate threat. "The Cardassians," Indus said, her voice tight with worry. "They'll be trying to find a way down here." Arthur's eyes narrowed with commitment. "Not if we have anything to say about it." He moved to a nearby control panel, now able to understand its function thanks to the precursor's gift. "Let's see what this place can do." With a few deft commands, he activated the facility's defense grid. On the surface, the Cardassian ground forces found themselves suddenly under attack from weapons emplacements that seemed to rise from the very Earth itself. But their victory was short-lived. The Cardassian fleet in orbit, faced with the loss of their ground troops, resorted to orbital bombardment. The underground facility shook with each impact, dust and debris raining down from the ceiling. "We can't stay here," Arthur shouted over the din. He pointed to one of the sleek alien ships. "That's our ticket out of here. You up for a crash course in precursor piloting?" Indus nodded, her face set with persistence. They raced to the vessel, its systems coming to life at their approach. As they strapped themselves in, Arthur's hands flew over the controls, his mind working in concert with the ship's interface in a way that felt almost instinctive. "Hold on," he warned as the ship lifted off. Indus gripped her seat as they shot upward through a concealed launch tube, emerging into the chaos of orbital combat. The scene that greeted them was one of frantic battle. The HSS Intrepid had arrived, engaging the Cardassian fleet despite being heavily outnumbered. Arthur's military training kicked in as he assessed the situation. "They don't stand a chance," he muttered, then turned to Indus with a grin. "Unless we even the odds a bit." What followed was a dogfight unlike any in recorded history. The precursor ship danced through space, its advanced technology allowing Arthur to outmaneuver and outgun the Cardassian vessels with ease. Indus worked the ship's auxiliary systems, her quick mind adapting to the alien interfaces and providing crucial support. In a matter of minutes, the tide of battle had turned. The remaining Cardassian ships, faced with an enemy they couldn't hope to match, turned tail and fled the system. As the adrenaline of combat faded, Arthur and Indus found themselves face-to-face with a new challenge. The comm system crackled to life with a hail from the Intrepid. "Unknown vessel, this is Captain Marcus Holt of the HSS Intrepid. Identify yourself immediately." Arthur took a deep breath, sharing a look with Indus. This was it, the moment that could change everything. He opened a channel, his voice steady as he began to explain their incredible journey. "Captain Holt, this is Arthur Chen, United Earth Defense Force. I have with me Indus Tal, a Bajoran diplomat. We've got one hell of a story to tell you." As Arthur recounted their harrowing adventure and the monumental discovery they had made, Indus found her gaze drawn to him. The human soldier had become so much more to her over the course of their ordeal. She reached out, placing her hand over his, and felt a surge of warmth as he intertwined their fingers without breaking his narrative. Whatever came next, whether it was a new era of cooperation or unforeseen conflicts, they would face it together. As the Intrepid led them towards the nearest human starbase, Arthur and Indus knew that their journey and their relationship was only just beginning. As the Intrepid led them towards the nearest human starbase, Arthur and Indus knew that their journey and their relationship was only just starting. The massive structure of Starbase Omega loomed before them, a testament to human engineering prowess on the fringes of explored space. As their ship docked, Arthur felt a mix of relief and apprehension. He glanced at Indus, seeing his own emotions mirrored in her eyes. "Ready?" he asked softly. She nodded, squeezing his hand. Together. The moment their feet touched the deck, they were surrounded by a team of armed guards. A stern-faced man with commander's insignia stepped forward. "Arthur Chen? Indus Tal? I'm Commander Jack Harper, Chief of Security. You'll come with us immediately." They were escorted through the bustling corridors of the starbase, drawing curious glances from personnel they passed. Arthur's military training kicked in as he cataloged potential escape routes and choke points, a habit he couldn't shake despite the supposedly friendly surroundings. The debriefing room was a stark, windowless chamber. A panel of high-ranking officials sat behind a long table, their faces a mix of curiosity, skepticism, and barely concealed excitement. Arthur recognized the stern visage of Admiral Elena Zhao, her reputation for no-nonsense efficiency well known throughout the Terran Defense Force. Beside her sat a Bajoran woman, whose presence commanded respect, Ambassador Kira Nerys. "Mr. Chen, Ms. Tal," Admiral Zhao began, her voice clipped. "You've caused quite a stir. Please, start from the beginning." For the next several hours, Arthur and Indus recounted their harrowing adventure. They described the Cardassian attack, their discovery of the precursor facility, and the incredible technology they had encountered. As they spoke, the atmosphere in the room grew increasingly tense. "A fully equipped alien base?" Ambassador Kira leaned forward, her eyes wide. "And you're certain the Cardassians were attempting to claim it?" Arthur nodded grimly. "There's no doubt. They were willing to risk open conflict to get their hands on it." The revelation sent a ripple of murmurs through the assembled officials. Admiral Zhao's frown deepened. "This changes everything," she muttered, almost to herself. Then louder, "We need to secure that planet immediately. A show of force—" "Force?" Ambassador Kira interrupted, her voice sharp. "That's exactly the kind of response that could escalate this into a full-scale war. We need a diplomatic solution." The debate erupted, voices rising as human and Bajoran officials argued strategy. Arthur and Indus exchanged worried glances, feeling the fragile alliance between their peoples strain under the weight of this new discovery. Suddenly, the door burst open. A young lieutenant rushed in, face flushed with urgency. "Admiral, Mr. Ambassador, we have a situation. News of the precursor discovery has leaked to the media. It's all over the networks." The room fell silent for a moment before erupting into chaos once more. Admiral Zhao barked orders for damage control, while Ambassador Kira demanded to know how this could have happened. In the midst of the commotion, Arthur felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to see Commander Harper, his expression grim. "You two with me now." Before Arthur could protest, he was being led away from Indus. He caught a glimpse of her being escorted in the opposite direction by Bajoran officials. The look of fear and confusion on her face made his heart clench. "Where are you taking her?" Arthur demanded. Harper's grip tightened. "That's not your concern, soldier. We have some questions for you." The next few hours were a blur of interrogation. Human intelligence officers grilled Arthur relentlessly, probing for any sign that his loyalty might have been compromised by his relationship with Indus. They dissected every moment of his time on X-395, questioning his decisions and motivations. "You have to understand our position, Mr. Chen," one officer said, his voice deceptively calm. "A human soldier, alone with a Bajoran diplomat, stumbles upon the most significant discovery in centuries. It's convenient, don't you think?" Arthur gritted his teeth, fatigue and frustration wearing at his patience. "There was nothing convenient about it. We nearly died a dozen times over." Meanwhile, in another part of the starbase, Indus faced her own ordeal. Bajoran officials pressed her for details about the precursor technology, their questions becoming increasingly pointed. "Surely you must have gleaned more about their weapons systems," one insisted. "Think, child. The future of Bajor could depend on what you remember." Indus shook her head, fighting back tears of exhaustion and frustration. "I've told you everything I know. Please, where is Arthur? Is he all right?" The Bajoran official's eyes narrowed. "Your concern for the human is noted, Ms. Tal. I hope it hasn't clouded your judgment or your loyalties." As the interrogations dragged on, tension continued to mount throughout the starbase. Reports trickled in of public unrest in both human and Bajoran space. Some viewed the precursor discovery as a threat to be contained, others as an opportunity to be seized. Protests and counter-protests erupted on dozens of worlds. Just as it seemed the situation couldn't become more volatile, a priority alert blared through the command center. Admiral Zhao and Ambassador Kira rushed to the main view screen, where a tactical display showed a disturbing development. "Cardassian fleet movements," a tactical officer reported. "They're mobilizing near the X-395 system. Long-range scans indicate a major offensive force." Admiral Zhao's face hardened. "They're making their play for the precursor tech. We can't let that happen." For once, Ambassador Kira nodded in agreement. "If the Cardassians gain control of that technology, both our peoples will be at risk." The two leaders shared a look of grim understanding. Whatever their differences, this threat demanded a united response. In the interrogation room, Arthur's head snapped up as alarms began to sound. Before he could ask what was happening, the door slid open to reveal Admiral Zhao herself. "On your feet, Chen," she ordered. "We have a situation and I need your expertise." Moments later, Arthur found himself in a strategy room, standing before a holographic display of the X-395 system. To his immense relief, Indus was there as well, looking tired but unharmed. Their eyes met, a world of unspoken emotion passing between them. Admiral Zhao wasted no time with pleasantries. "The Cardassians are moving on X-395. We're assembling a joint task force to secure the precursor facility before they arrive. Chen, given your first-hand experience, I want you to lead this operation." Arthur's mind raced, considering the immense responsibility and risk of such a mission. "I'll do it," he said firmly. "On one condition. Indus comes with me as liaison to the Bajoran contingent. We work best as a team." A tense silence followed as Admiral Zhao and Ambassador Kira exchanged glances. Finally, the Admiral nodded. "Agreed. But understand this. The fate of two civilizations rests on the success of this mission. Failure is not an option." As the room erupted into a flurry of activity, Arthur and Indus found a moment alone. They embraced, the stress of their separation melting away. "I was so worried," Indus whispered. Arthur held her tight. "Me too, but we're together now, and we have a job to do." They pulled apart, their expressions growing serious as they contemplated the challenge ahead. The complexities of their relationship, the clash of loyalties, the weight of their discovery, all of it paled in comparison to the immediate threat they faced. Hours later, Arthur and Indus stood on the bridge of the lead ship in the hastily assembled joint task force. Human and Bajoran vessels surrounded them, an unprecedented show of cooperation born of desperate necessity. As the fleet prepared to jump to warp, Arthur took a deep breath. He felt the eyes of the bridge crew upon him, human and Bajoran alike, all looking to him for leadership. Beside him, Indus straightened her shoulders, her presence a source of strength and comfort. "All ships report ready, sir," the communications officer announced. Arthur nodded, his voice steady as he gave the command that would hurl them back into the heart of danger. "Engage!" "Jump complete," the navigator announced as the task force dropped out of warp. Arthur leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the main view screen. The X-395 system loomed before them, a mix of anticipation and dread settling in his stomach. Long-range scans detecting multiple Cardassian signatures in orbit around the planet, the sensor officer reported, her voice tense. "It's a large fleet, sir. They've beaten us here." Arthur exchanged a glance with Indus, seeing his own concern mirrored in her eyes. He took a deep breath, mind racing through potential strategies. "We're not out of this yet," he said, turning to the communications officer. Signal the task force. We're initiating stealth protocols. As the orders were relayed, Arthur moved to the precursor interface they'd integrated into the bridge. His fingers danced across the alien controls, the movements now second nature after their harrowing escape. Indus, I need you on this, he called out. She was at his side in an instant, her hands joining his on the interface. Together, they coaxed the advanced technology to life. A shimmering field of energy began to form around their ship, quickly expanding to encompass the entire task force. Sensor blocking field active, Indus confirmed, her voice steady despite the tension evident in her posture. The Cardassians won't see us coming. Arthur nodded, allowing himself a small smile. Nice work. Helm, take us in. Nice and easy. The joint human-Bajoran fleet crept forward, slipping past the outer perimeter of the Cardassian blockade. Arthur held his breath, watching as enemy ships passed within visual range, oblivious to their presence. As they entered the planet's atmosphere, alarms suddenly blared across the bridge. The ship rocked violently, nearly throwing Arthur from his feet. What the hell was that? He demanded, steadying himself against a console. Planetary defenses, the tactical officer shouted. The Cardassians have activated the precursor weapon systems. They're targeting the entire fleet. Arthur cursed under his breath. Of course, the Cardassians would find a way to turn the ancient technology against them. He turned back to the precursor interface, Indus already working furiously beside him. We need to shut those defenses down, Arthur said, his fingers flying across the alien controls. If we can transmit the override codes... Already on it, Indus replied, her brow furrowed in concentration. But the Cardassians have locked us out of several subsystems. It's going to take time to break through. Another blast rocked the ship. On the display, Arthur watched as a Bajoran cruiser took a direct hit, its shields flaring brilliantly before collapsing. We don't have time, Arthur growled. He closed his eyes, reaching deep into his memory of the precursor facility. There had to be a way, a back door they'd overlooked. Suddenly it clicked, his eyes snapped open, and he input a rapid sequence of commands. Indus, route the override through the tertiary power grid. It'll bypass their lockouts. Her eyes widened in understanding, and she quickly complied. For a tense moment, nothing happened. Then all at once, the incoming fire ceased. Planetary defenses neutralized, the tactical officer reported, unable to keep the relief from her voice. A cheer went up across the bridge, but Arthur knew they couldn't celebrate yet. All ships, begin your descent, he ordered. We need to secure that facility before... His words were cut off as space around them erupted into chaos. The Cardassian fleet, finally alerted to their presence, launched a massive counterattack. Energy weapons crisscrossed the sky as the two fleets collided in low orbit. We're out of time, Arthur said, turning to Indus. We need to get to the surface now. Assemble the strike team. Minutes later, Arthur found himself in the cramped confines of a dropship, surrounded by a mix of human and Bajoran special forces. Indus sat beside him, her face a mask of persistence as she checked her weapon. Remember, Arthur addressed the team, raising his voice over the roar of atmospheric entry, our primary objective is to secure the main entrance to the precursor facility. The Cardassians have had time to entrench themselves, so expect heavy resistance. The dropship shuddered as it broke through the cloud cover. Through the viewport, Arthur could see the jagged landscape of X-395 rushing up to meet them. In the distance, flashes of weapons fire marked the landing zones of other strike teams. 30 seconds to touchdown, the pilot called out. Arthur stood gripping a handrail as the ship banked sharply to avoid incoming fire. He looked at the faces of his team, human and Bajoran alike, all united in this crucial moment. Whatever happens down there, he said, we're making history today. Let's make it count. The dropship slammed into the ground, its landing struts absorbing the impact. The rear hatch blew open, and Arthur led the charge into the alien sunlight of X-395. Immediately, they were met with a hail of disruptor fire. Cardassian soldiers had established fortified positions around the facility entrance, their weapons cutting swathes through the rocky terrain. Cover! Arthur shouted, diving behind a low ridge. He popped up, squeezing off several shots from his rifle. A Cardassian went down, but two more took his place. The air filled with the sound of weapons fire and shouted orders as the battle intensified. Arthur's team slowly pushed forward, using the natural rock formations for cover. He glanced to his left, seeing Indus moving gracefully from cover to cover, her shots finding their marks with unnerving accuracy. Suddenly, a Cardassian energy blast struck dangerously close to Indus's position. The rock face she was using for cover exploded, showering her with debris. Arthur's heart leapt into his throat as he saw her stumble, momentarily exposed. Without thinking, he vaulted over his cover, sprinting towards her. Time seemed to slow as he saw a squad of Cardassian soldiers take aim. In that moment, something primal took over. Arthur's body moved with inhuman speed and precision, his rifle barking again and again. When it was over, Arthur stood in the midst of the fallen Cardassian squad, his chest heaving. He turned to see Indus staring at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and something deeper, unspoken. "Are you all right?" he asked, moving to her side. She nodded, still looking at him with that intense gaze. Yes, thank you." The moment was broken as the rest of the team pushed forward, securing the area. Arthur shook himself, refocusing on the mission at hand. "We need to get inside," he said, gesturing towards the facility entrance. "The Cardassians have already breached the outer defenses." Arthur quickly divided the team, sending half to secure the perimeter, while he, Indus, and a small group prepared to enter the facility. As they approached the massive doors, signs of forced entry were evident. "Be ready for anything," Arthur warned as they stepped into the shadowy interior. "We know this place, but the Cardassians have had time to set up shop. Stay alert." They moved swiftly through the twisting corridors, encountering pockets of Cardassian resistance. Arthur's familiarity with the layout proved invaluable as they navigated around reactivated security measures and ambush points. As they neared the central control room, the sound of voices and equipment echoed down the hallway. Arthur held up a fist, signaling the team to halt. He crept forward, peering around a corner. Inside the vast chamber, a team of Cardassian scientists worked feverishly at the main computer core. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter, their weapons at the ready. Arthur turned back to his team, his expression grim. "This is it," he whispered. "We take this room. We take control of the entire facility. Indus, I need you on that computer the second we clear the room. Everyone else, watch her back and keep the Cardassians off us. Clear?" A chorus of quiet affirmatives answered him. Arthur took a deep breath, locking eyes with Indus one last time. In that silent exchange, volumes were spoken. Whatever happened next, they were in this together. "Go!" Arthur shouted, bursting into the control room with his weapon blazing. The air filled with the sound of weapons fire and shouts of surprise as the battle for control of the precursor facility reached its climax. Climactic moment. The Cardassian scientists scrambled for cover as Arthur's team poured into the room, laying down suppressing fire. Arthur dove behind an overturned console, his heart pounding. He glanced at Indus, who had taken position behind a nearby pillar. Their eyes met, and a silent understanding passed between them. "Cover me!" Arthur shouted, gesturing toward the main computer core. Indus nodded, popping out from her cover to provide covering fire. Arthur sprinted across the room, energy blasts sizzling past him. He reached the core, his fingers flying over the alien interface. But something was wrong. The system wasn't responding as it should. "Arthur!" Indus called out, her voice tight with tension. "We have a problem. The Cardassians have locked us out of critical systems." He cursed under his breath, realizing the gravity of their situation. The sounds of battle raged around them, but a new threat loomed. Through the facility's sensors, Arthur detected a massive Cardassian battleship entering orbit. "We're out of options," Arthur said, his voice grim. He turned to Indus, who had fought her way to his side. "We need to activate the precursor weapon." Indus's eyes widened. "Arthur, you know how dangerous that is. The mental link could—" "I know," he cut her off, his expression softening. "But it's our only chance, and you're the only one who can do it." She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "All right, but you need to watch my back." Arthur squeezed her hand. Always. They moved to the neural interface station, Arthur providing cover fire as Indus prepared herself. She took a deep breath, then placed her hands on the alien controls. The effect was immediate. Indus's body went rigid, her eyes rolling back as her consciousness merged with the precursor system. Arthur watched in horror as she began to convulse, her face contorted in pain. "Indus!" He grabbed her shoulders, steadying her. "Stay with me. You can do this." Around them, the battle raged on. Arthur's team held their ground, but the Cardassians were pressing hard. Through the facility's sensors, he could see the massive battleship moving into position, preparing to unleash its devastating weaponry. Indus gasped, her body arching. "Arthur, it's not just a weapon, it's a network, so vast." He held her tighter, feeling helpless as she struggled within the alien system. "Whatever it is, use it. We're running out of time." Sweat beaded on Indus's forehead as she pushed deeper into the precursor network. Suddenly, the facility hummed to life. Energy coursed through ancient conduits, and a massive field began to form around the planet. On the sensors, Arthur watched in awe as the energy field expanded, engulfing not just X-395 but the entire system. The Cardassian battleship, caught in the field's expansion, suddenly went dark. Its weapons powered down, its engines sputtered and died. The same effect rippled across the Cardassian fleet. Ship after ship lost power, left drifting helplessly in space. A cheer went up from Arthur's team as they realized what had happened. But Arthur's focus remained on Indus. Her vital signs were fluctuating wildly, her connection to the precursor system pushing her body to its limits. "Indus, you did it. You can let go now," Arthur urged, trying to break her connection. But she didn't respond. Her consciousness was too deeply intertwined with the alien technology. Arthur's mind raced. He couldn't lose her. Not now, not after everything they'd been through. In that moment, he made a decision that would change everything. "I'm coming for you," he whispered, activating the neural interface for himself. The sensation was unlike anything he had ever experienced. His mind expanded, merging with the vast precursor network. He could feel the power coursing through him, the weight of eons of knowledge pressing against his consciousness. And there, scattered across the virtual landscape, he found fragments of Indus. Her essence had been stretched thin across the network, threatening to dissolve completely into the alien system. Arthur began the painstaking process of gathering her psyche, carefully reassembling the pieces of her consciousness. It was like trying to catch smoke with his bare hands, each fragment slipping away as soon as he grasped it. Time lost all meaning in this virtual realm. Arthur pushed on, driven by a commitment he didn't know he possessed. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he felt Indus's consciousness solidify. "Arthur?" Her voice echoed through the network, filled with confusion and relief. "I'm here," he responded, his own mental voice sounding strange to him. "We need to get out of here." Together, they began the delicate process of extricating themselves from the precursor system. It was like swimming against a powerful current, the alien technology reluctant to release its hold on them. With a final Herculean effort, they broke free. Arthur gasped as his consciousness slammed back into his physical body. He found himself on the floor of the control room. Indus collapsed beside him. As he struggled to focus his vision, Arthur realized that hours had passed. The sounds of battle had been replaced by the organized chaos of a military operation in its aftermath. Human and Bajoran soldiers moved purposefully through the facility, securing prisoners and technology. Arthur turned to Indus, his heart leaping as he saw her eyes flutter open. They stared at each other, words failing to capture the profound experience they had just shared. A medical team rushed to their side, quickly assessing their condition. As they were being tended to, Admiral Zhao strode into the room, her face a mixture of concern and triumph. "Lieutenant Commander, Ensign," she addressed them, her voice filled with admiration. "What you've accomplished here today, it's beyond anything we could have hoped for." Arthur tried to sit up, wincing at the effort. "The Cardassians?" "Surrendered," Zhao confirmed. "Their fleet is disabled and we have control of the facility. But that's just the beginning." The Admiral's expression grew serious. Your actions have changed the balance of power in this sector, possibly in the entire quadrant. The political ramifications are complex. Arthur and Indus exchanged glances, the weight of their actions settling upon them. They had saved X-395, perhaps even turned the tide of the war. But as they looked into each other's eyes, they knew that their journey together was far from finished. The precursor technology they had unlocked, the bond they had forged within its virtual realm, these would shape not just their futures, but the future of human-Bajoran relations and beyond. As the medical team prepared to move them, Arthur reached out and took Indus's hand. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Together, whatever challenges lay ahead. As the medical team prepared to move them, Arthur felt a gentle squeeze on his hand. He turned to see Indus looking at him, her eyes filled with a mix of exhaustion and something deeper. "We did it," she whispered, her voice hoarse. Arthur nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "We did, but I have a feeling our work here isn't quite finished." His words proved prophetic. In the days that followed, as they recovered from their ordeal, Arthur and Indus found themselves at the center of a whirlwind of activity. The facility on X-395 buzzed with researchers and military personnel, all eager to unravel the secrets of the precursor technology. As their strength returned, Arthur noticed Indus's gaze constantly drawn to the alien machinery that surrounded them. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity and wonder, reminding him of their first encounter on Harmony Station. "How about one last tour before we leave?" Arthur suggested as they prepared for their departure. "For old time's sake." Indus's face lit up. "I'd like that." They walked through the twisting corridors of the facility, their footsteps echoing in the ancient halls. Arthur found himself seeing the place through new eyes, appreciating the seamless blend of form and function in the precursor architecture. As they rounded a corner, Indus suddenly stopped. "Arthur, look at this," she said, pointing to a faint outline on the wall. "I don't remember seeing this before." Arthur ran his hand along the wall, feeling a slight vibration beneath his fingers. With a soft hiss, a hidden door slid open, revealing a chamber they hadn't discovered in their previous explorations. "After you," Arthur said, gesturing for Indus to enter. The room was small, dominated by a single piece of equipment in the center. It resembled nothing so much as an elaborately designed medical scanner, its sleek lines glowing with a soft pulsing light. Indus approached it, her fingers hovering just above its surface. "This technology, it's incredible. I wonder what it does." Arthur stepped closer, studying the device. "Only one way to find out," he said with a grin. "How about we satisfy that curiosity of yours about human physiology?" Indus looked at him, her antennae twitching in surprise. "Are you sure?" "Why not? We've already shared our minds in the precursor network. This seems tame in comparison." With a nod from Indus, Arthur positioned himself on the scanner. She activated the device, and immediately a detailed holographic image of Arthur's body sprang to life above them. As the image rotated, Arthur caught Indus staring at a particular area of his anatomy. Their eyes met, and suddenly, they both burst into laughter. "Well," Arthur said between chuckles, "I guess some mysteries are finally solved." Indus's laughter subsided, replaced by a warm smile. "Arthur, thank you. Not just for this, but for everything. When we first met, I never imagined we'd end up here." Arthur stepped off the scanner, moving closer to her. "Neither did I, but I'm glad we did." Their moment was interrupted by a chime from their communicators. It was time to leave for Earth. The journey back was a blur of debriefings and preparations. Before they knew it, they were standing in the grand hall of the United Earth Government headquarters in New Geneva, surrounded by a sea of dress uniforms and formal attire. Admiral Zhao's voice rang out across the hall. "Lieutenant Commander Arthur Gray and Ensign Indus, step forward." As they approached the podium, Arthur felt Indus's hand brush against his. He glanced at her, seeing his own mix of pride and nervousness reflected in her eyes. "Your actions on X-395 have not only secured a vital strategic asset, but have opened up new avenues for exploration and cooperation between our peoples," Zhao continued. In recognition of this, and with the full support of both human and Bajoran governments, I am pleased to announce the formation of a new joint research initiative dedicated to the study and implementation of precursor technology. A murmur of excitement rippled through the crowd. Zhao paused, allowing the news to sink in before delivering her final announcement. Furthermore, given your unique experience and demonstrated ability to work across species lines, I am naming you both as co-directors of this project. Arthur blinked in surprise, turning to see Indus's expression mirroring his own. As they accepted their new roles, their eyes met, a silent understanding passing between them. Their journey together was just getting started. The ceremony concluded, but the day's events were not yet complete. Arthur had one more surprise for Indus. "There's somewhere I'd like you to see," he said as they left the government complex. Hours later, they stood on the porch of the Gray family farm in Montana, watching the sun set over fields of golden wheat. Arthur watched Indus's face as she took in the scene, her expression one of wonder. "It's beautiful," she breathed, "so different from anything on Bajor." Arthur's parents emerged from the house, their initial hesitation melting away as they saw the way Arthur and Indus looked at each other. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Arthur took a deep breath. It was time to say what he'd been feeling for so long. "Indus," he began, turning to face her, "this adventure, everything we've been through, it's made me realize something. Love isn't bound by species or culture. It's about connection, understanding, shared experiences. And what I feel for you—" Indus's eyes widened, her antennae quivering slightly. "Arthur, I feel the same. My curiosity about humans may have brought us together, but it's you, Arthur Gray, that I've fallen in love with." Their lips met in a soft, tender kiss, the culmination of their long journey together. But even as they embraced, their communicators chimed in unison. Reluctantly, they separated. The message was from the Precursor Research Center. A breakthrough in translating the alien language had revealed coordinates to other precursor sites across the galaxy. Arthur and Indus looked at each other, excitement building in their eyes. Their next adventure was calling. "Ready to explore some more alien anatomy?" Arthur asked with a grin. Indus laughed, playfully swatting his arm. "Lead the way, co-director." Hand in hand, they walked towards the waiting shuttle, the stars above promising new discoveries and adventures. As they boarded, Arthur couldn't help but feel that this was just the beginning of something far greater than either of them could imagine.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.